So good morning, everyone. I hope everybody got a chance to get a coffee, something to eat. My name is Joël Carbon, and I'm going to be moderating this panel. I'm very excited to be here with the food champions today, and I'm going to give you just a little bit of a synopsis of their bios, but the full bio, you can find it in the program. So, the furthest away from me is Jill Bishop. Now, I don't know how much Jill needs introduction in Peterborough. Jill is working with the Peterborough Community Garden Network, and she's also an experienced seed saver. She has her own seed business, and you might also know her from the downtown farmers market. Beside Jill is Wayne Roberts. So many of you will have met Wayne last night after the movie Just Eat It. Wayne is a Canadian food policy analyst and writer. He's widely respected for his role with the innovative Toronto Food Policy Council, the City of Toronto's Environmental Task Force, and the influential Toronto-based Coalition for a Green Economy. Beside Wayne is Carolyn Doris. Carolyn is a dietitian with the Peterborough Community, too many Peterborough County City House Unit, and she's been in that role for 15 years. Carolyn has done work with school policy, and now she's involved in food security. And she also happens to be a farmer, which is kind of important before I get to this conversation. And beside me is Ryan Dittler. He's gone in.
I want to hear you try.
Okay, Glenn Haka, Mohawk from the Mohawk territory. Thank you. You gentle. Throughout his young life, he has had a great passion for restoring what he calls life-affirming human systems, focusing on Haka life ways. He has worked also as a farmer, raising mixed crops and a variety of farm animals. So, a wide breadth of experience and expertise, and we're now going to start the conversation. But I want you to know, because I know quite a few people in the room, and there's a lot of expertise in the room as well. So I'm hoping that maybe 10 minutes before the end of this talk, you'll have a chance to ask questions to the panelists as well, okay? So I thought that the first question I would ask has to do with theme. Now, you may know that the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN every year puts out a theme, a way for all of us to reflect on an issue of importance. Last year, 2014, the theme was the family farm, which, by the way, is the theme of a movie this afternoon at 2 that I would highly recommend you go and see. This year, 2015, the theme is soils. So imagine now if the FAO were to call you and say, you know, what would be a suggestion for a theme for 2016? What would be your theme and why? Who wants to start? Jill is laughing, so maybe I'm going to pass on the...
I think everybody already knows my answer, but... As I already hear people saying in the audience, you know my answer. It would be seeds. And the reason why is, I spoke a bit about this yesterday before the sower, but because I firmly believe that all this wonderful work we're doing around local food would be impossible without seeds. As I said, they're the very heart of our food system. Can't grow anything, can't feed any animals if we don't have access to local, sustainable seeds. We lose access to those, we pretty much lose access to all these other amazing things we're trying to do. So I would say seeds.
So I haven't had very much experience in my life of anyone saying, what do you think our theme for the year should be? I have to figure out what I want to say, and Jen, that is, what their theme for the year is. So I suppose I prefer to be human-centric, because most people who live in the world are human-centric and don't necessarily, if you look at all the popular magazines in the world, they all have a picture of a person on the front cover, and when you look at the environmental magazines, it's got a picture of the planet Earth is seen from the moon or a forest or something. And the fact is, I think that people do relate to other people. That's who they feel resonant with. So I would look for a human theme. And I think we should try to do that more often. As much as we're keen on soil and seeds and other things, we're trying to be in the business of relating to people. And to me, the theme I would pick is work, which I think is the biggest problem faced, especially by young people in our society. What are they going to do for a career? And I think a way to think about it is to not think about the career, but to think about work. And the great tradition of a book that had a huge impact on my generation called Small is Beautiful, which was to find meaningful work is not just to mean to have a good job that your parents will say you've been successful and it's worth putting you through college. And so I think that is the biggest challenge of our society, I believe, is that they cannot find meaningful work for people who want to do meaningful work.
Following Wayne Roberts is kind of exciting. And again, I'm coming very much from a health focus as well, working in public health. And for me, I think with soils, I think of the basics of health and the need to grow healthy communities, starting with the soil, as well as equity and income and justice and all that's related. That we can have soil, we can have food, but if people don't have the basic income to be able to afford it, we're not any further ahead as a society. So I think that's what I would say.
Didn't give me enough time to think of my answer. What's going on in Mumbai, which is not ways of what job when these are on there. Greetings everybody gathered here today.
You speak into the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Is this better? What when we're all going to is what job when these are not is it what way. Just said welcome everybody for being here and thank you for inviting me, whoever invited me. But that's a hard question to answer because I don't know what the themes were in previous years. But I would say the first thing that came to my mind was land and access to land. It made me think about in our history. I'm Ganyake Haga Mohawk from a place called Wakta, which is in presently known Muskoka Lakes, so 3 hours north of here. We don't come from there. We come from central New York, northern New York. And we're not there anymore because of George Washington and Colonel Sullivan, John Sullivan, in 1779, who had George Washington ordered Colonel Sullivan to go into our lands and burn down every single one of our villages, find all of our crops, burn all those out, and basically get us off the land, get us away from our connection to the land, in order to take over the land, in order to gain access to resources to fuel capitalism. And that's unfortunately what we're still dealing with today. We all have issues with access to land. Where can I grow food? Where can I learn to live off the land? And even access to food. So, what are the issues preventing us from getting on that land? From which brings me to think about sovereignty and self-sufficiency. If you don't have self-sufficiency to maintain your communities, that's food sovereignty and energy sovereignty, then that puts you at the whim of the greater power. Right? So we have to start thinking about ways to dismantle that.
Thank you, everybody. So you can see from just those 4 different themes, the breadth of issues that connect to food. And so that brings me to my next question. I don't know if some of you yesterday saw the movie, The Hand That Feeds. It was a movie about undocumented immigrant workers in New York City, working in a deli and trying to create a union to address the working conditions that they had in that deli. And there was one character in the movie who at one point said, to make change, we have to build a movement. So my question is, have we been able to build a food movement? And if so, what change are we working for? So, Ryan, do you want me to start from you and do it the other way? Or is there somebody who wants to answer that question first? Wow.
That's a big one.
Sure, I can. Unless you can. I would say that we do have the start of a food movement. I think we have a much greater awareness about the importance of local food and the family farm after the Just Eat It film. I think it ties in with the need for us to have individual actions, which I think we are doing in Peterborough, but more actions together as a community to stand up and say we need change so that the food movement grows farther. And then I think it's that other piece that we certainly talk about all the time around government action and government change, which is much easier to say than to do or influence, and I think that's where we really need to focus efforts next. I'll just put in a plug too that over at the side, and we've been giving them out this weekend, are the Connect the Dots piece, which is really about pulling together people's actions, so all of you, to do something around our local food system so that we have the power to then make a bigger change and force some political change.
Well, I think we're in the process of trying to understand what a food movement is about. So many of us who, such as myself, who thought we were in the food movement, we're actually, in my opinion, now that I look back, not in the food movement. We were before the era of the food movement. I actually think the food movement is pretty recent. I was working for the City of Toronto in the Food Policy Council, which I think you could fairly say before I came from 1991 when it started, and in the first few years that I was there after 2000, it was really a movement about agriculture and how agriculture needs to be shaped in order to serve the needs of health. So it was about nutrition, health understood as nutrition, and food understood as coming from agriculture. And I would say around 2004, I started noticing that all of a sudden, we were regularly getting about 50 people coming to our meetings, and the biggest difference between them and the people who were on the Food Policy Council is everyone in the Food Policy Council was over 40, and everybody who was in the audience was under 25. And so I saw the food movement before my eyes became a youth. Sorry, I didn't really get that angry.
It happened yesterday, so it's not yesterday.
Okay, I'll try again. Can you hear me? Okay.
The volume, because I wasn't sure what was happening.
Bear with us for a second.
Yeah.
Technical difficulty.
We have been, since around 2004, of discovering what is the food movement. And I think it is a movement that appreciates the entirety of the food life cycle. It is not just about agriculture. It is also about eating, the joys of eating. It is not just about nutrition. It is about health more broadly. And in my opinion, for instance, the whole field of food and mental health has been very much under investigated, and we need to put it way up on the agenda. And so I think we're in a process of understanding food in its entirety, and that's what the food movement is about. And I believe, therefore, it means that the food movement is intrinsically what you could call a big tent movement. And we have to get away from everyone's entitled to the smaller tent that they want to be in, whether it's farmer markets or organic or whatever, they're all important. But there's a point in which we also need to understand we're part of a very big tent because food is a very big thing.
Is this working, or you want me to just project?
Say the word.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I agree with what they're saying. I think just working towards an even wider, more inclusive definition. I'll just say two quick examples that I think that I've seen in some of my works day to day. and then try to explain why I use these examples after. The first is I work for the Downtown Farmers Market, as many of you know. And over the last few years, I've seen people ask a lot of questions of their farmers, which I think is amazing. Did you grow this food? Where did it come from? All these things are great. But unfortunately, I've seen a dark side to that as well, a flip side. I've seen people question, or people who are commercial, conventional farmers, did you grow this food? Yes. Do you use any sprays? Yes. They throw in the food back at these farmers. And to me, it puts a pit in my stomach. These are hard-working family farmers who bring truckloads of food into our city every single day. And to have somebody, if you want to buy organic food, that's incredible, that's great. This is why we have a farmer's market, make those choices. But please don't ever be rude to those farmers who get up at 4 in the morning, who go to bed at 11 at night, and who work really hard to bring you that food. So the food movement is about choices. It's about having those opportunities, and I think that we need to make sure that we're not judging those people and that we're making it an inclusive movement for everybody. And the second thing that I would say is we are sitting on an urban agriculture committee right now, and at this point in the city, it's practically illegal for you to grow food and sell it, which to me, it's great that we're getting people out, community gardeners, but why can't they make a living off that? Why can't we provide an opportunity for young people to have a job selling that incredible food? So lots of amazing work already done, so much more to do. So I'm glad you guys are all here and going to be part of that.
Turn it on. Try turning it on.
I can project. I'll do my best. I know that's a really hard question too. I don't have a lot of good ideas. Like I'm really not that smart. So what I do is I try and look to what people have done before, right? So I don't really look so much at it as the food movement, but I just look at it as remembering, right? Because the situation we are in right now is, in my opinion, insane. And if you don't think it is insane, then you're pretty insane. We're so disconnected to our food, it's unbelievable. And if you think about 200 years ago, when you asked your ancestors, or you brought them here, they would be astonished, right? The fact that you don't know, you can't answer where our food comes, who grew it, those kind of things are unbelievable. That we don't help each other to grow our food, to take care of one another. We stomp on the backs of one another in competition, because that's the way we're told that we'll achieve the greatest success and best for the entire society if we go out, if we help ourselves and ourselves only. So we have to look back to what we've always done as human beings, and that's live in community, right? Restore community, and what brings community is food. What fosters community is food, and like I said before, self-sufficiency. We're looking after ourselves, helping one another. Food isn't separate from being able to keep ourselves warm, putting clothes on our backs. What are ways that we can what makes me think about is how can we restore humility within our communities, right? And which is the core thing I think about when it comes to a relationship with food, is we are utterly dependent on that food, just like we're utterly dependent on one another, and we constantly fight against that, in this current society. And we have to thank all those foods, thank each other, welcome each other, love each other, ask for help when we need help. And those are the things I think about when I'm thinking about the food movement today. That's what we start concentrating on. And like Wayne said, it's not just about food, production, maintaining food security, whatever that means, So, yeah, that's it.
Hello? Yes, sorry. I really appreciate what you just said, Ryan. And having been trained as a historian originally, I also tend to look to the past to see how people have dealt with issues that they've been facing to help them in the present. The piece that I feel, though, is a bit new when you think of the reality we live in with regard to food now, is the role of corporations. Wayne, you mentioned 2004 was the watershed year where you started to see more people coming and a generational shift. 2009, I don't know if you know that Hellmann's, mayonnaise like Hellmann's, they trademarked the expression, the real food movement. So I gathered after that we were part of the fake one. But it brings me to wonder, what is the role that corporations are playing with regard to food? How do you see them maybe potentially shaping that big tent movement? Anybody wants to answer that?
Well, the interesting thing about corporations is, and food is that there actually is less need for what corporations provide in the area of food than there is in any other area of life, because it can be incredibly simple that you grow some food in your backyard and cook it in your kitchen, and there isn't a need for an intermediary. And there's ways that you can go further than that without requiring the intervention of an outside corporation. So the paradox of food is that it is by...
Or compared to farmers markets. Or local food opportunities, and I've been doing grocery store tours as my job as a dietitian at the health unit for 15 plus years, and it amazes me to see the corporate domination of the grocery store and the changes of that in 15 years. That there's less and less fresh available. More and more imported available, even though we used to probably buy frozen broccoli or canned peaches, which were actually Ontario, until that food system was actually just cut out because we couldn't compete with things being brought outside and away from that local piece. I think of the frozen meals that warm up in 2 minutes, or frozen lasagnas, things that, from a food literacy, food skills piece was ingrained in us around being able to prepare fresh, healthy food or preparing food at the basics for healthy living, and how everything is going against what should be our basic instinctive nature around healthy eating. The other piece I think of is Michael Moss's Sugar, Salt, Fat, if anybody's read that, just around that marketing, that corporate domination, and the psychology around addiction and why our food system has changed. I also think of marketing to kids and that psychological piece that we know food marketers are using. We see from the tobacco example, and now it's transferred into the food system, and that's really shocking. That piece where corporations want children to start from cradle to identify their food products, so that the earlier they start to buy that, they'll be lifelong consumers of a certain product. Pester power and things like that Brian Cook from City of Toronto talks about. I think it is time that we start to stand up and make some change around just that basic nutrition that we need to be able to live healthy lives.
Can I just talk without it? Yeah. It's going to make me jump. So just speaking towards that Hellmann's campaign, in some ways I think that means we've kind of done our job. I mean, as soon as corporations start using those catchphrases, we know we've gotten to a certain level. I mean, you go on Monsanto's website and the word sustainable pops up, which is good for a laugh if you ever need that. You can go to the grocery store and you can buy organic Miracle-Gro soil. I mean, that's the biggest contradiction I've ever seen in my life. So I think, those catchphrases are getting big and people know them, and that is good. Of course, there's a flip side to that. So I really like, Ryan, what you said, the idea of restoring humility. And I think the problem with all those corporations using all those words is that they're still based around convenience. And people want their food to just be there when they want it. They want cherries in the middle of winter, and they want food that doesn't grow anywhere near them. And I think that's part of our problem. We need to understand that there's a lot of work that goes into growing this food. There's a process. We need to start working around some of those systems. I have people come to me at the farmer's market and say, I work on Wednesdays, I can't come. Totally understandable. You should have a farmer's market every day in every part of the town. When are those farmers going to grow that food, if that's the case? Sometimes you have to work around those farmers' schedules. I know we're all busy. I have 4 jobs myself. I totally understand that. But I think we need to shift. We need to start thinking. Food doesn't just pop out of the ground and show up on the grocery stores. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of community. So I think you need to start shifting those ideas, and as long as those corporations are telling you, you can get local organic food any day of the week, anytime you want it, it's just not true. So there's good and bad, I guess, to them jumping on those catchphrases. But.
Well, I think I have 2 answers. The one I think of is I brought this prop here today, just to entertain your eyes. Yeah. Yeah. Just to entertain your eyes, just in case I couldn't figure out anything interesting to say. But anyways, this is what we call it's a squash, old squash. It's called we say squash, but we have a word for it, which is chunhe, which means it sustains us, or they sustain us, I should say. And that represents a certain relationship that we have to our food, right? Which is familial, right? It is like your family. That sounds all nice and spiritual, but it means a lot, because what corporations do is they take that away and they turn it into a commodity. It's not new to any of us. But that idea, that thinking is something so hard to change in the situation that we're in now, but it's not that hard to change. Having food in our understanding as a commodity, just like anything else we have in our life, detaches us from our land so immensely that it's just unbelievable. But the other thing I think about too is that corporations take advantage of the vulnerable, right? The people who are struggling in the society that we're in right now. The people who are living on dimes a day, the people who are ostracized and living on the margins of the current society. Those are the people that corporations are counting on taking advantage. Those dispossessed people, and we need to restore dignity in their lives, and by doing that is restoring ability to take care of one of ourselves, like I said earlier. But I can say that I want to say that over and over again. How do we help each other? The longer we go competing with one another, the happier those corporations are going to be. So those low-income families, those Indigenous people living in Northern Ontario, homeless people in downtown Toronto, a food bank is going to help those people, but not only till tomorrow. Then we can do another food bank and help them to the next day, But it's not getting down to the fundamental issues, which is giving them helping each other to repossess the ability to take care of one another. So how do you do that? You need to re-engineer ideas to restore that. So instead of just concentrating on food banks, instead of just concentrating on diabetes clinics, we need to think about, doing the work that a lot of people are doing already, starting community gardens, getting access to young farmers in places that, they'd rather build a huge condominium, on what are the ways that we restore that? There's a lot of different ways, so that's it.
Thank you. These are great ideas. I see so many people here today in light of this film festival, and so I'm thinking that some of the ideas that you have expressed might. I'm wondering about the role that movies play in conveying those ideas to bigger audiences. So I don't know everybody in the audience today here, but I'm thinking maybe there's a filmmaker or there's another artist who is in search for some kind of inspiration. So I don't know if you have a movie idea that you've always wanted to see made, and here's the opportunity to make your pitch. And maybe next year we'll come back and watch that movie together. So what idea would that be?
I'm going to totally steal because I have the fortunate opportunity to work fairly regularly with Joelle, and we've had this discussion about the arts as an opportunity to really shift our thinking around food, and so Peterborough being a hockey town with a lot of focus on recreation and that sport in particular, I think a film, the shift of hockey town to food town would be great.
Food town powers hockey town.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too hard for me.
Well, I think the interesting thing is food is in a lot of movies these days, but it doesn't have to be self-conscious and deliberate. Like there's that great movie about the guy who starts off as a chef in this formula French restaurant in the US and then ends up with his own food truck. It's really the background of things. It doesn't have to be the center of the movie, so it doesn't have to be like I love the thing about the real dirt about Farmer John, but it's really not about, it's about his personal self-discovery. And so to me the artistic challenge is to deal with food in a way which isn't ultra self-conscious and puts it right in, gives it a central role without a starring role.
I guess a lot of people probably heard me tell the story of the Sturt Street Community Garden. It's a personal sort of pride that I have to be a part of this project. And for anyone that doesn't know it, it's a garden that the Community Garden Network has helped start. It's just about 3 blocks southwest that way. And it started because one of the neighbors came to me and said, I want the neighbors to talk to each other more, which I thought was such a wonderful reason for starting a community garden. It's in a park that you could find needles in the underside of the grass. People really didn't use it. There was a path that walked right through. That was it. The big tree fell down, all of a sudden filled with sunlight. And they thought, right, let's do this. So we helped them start a community garden. People started coming together. They started eating together. They started talking to each other. Within a year, the neighbors told me they saw reduced crime rates. They met way more of their neighbors. They ate better food. They shared food with each other. We saw it happen every day that I was down there. Kids in the park saying, can I help you weed? Yes, you can. And that group went ahead and now has started a neighborhood association. They've raised money to get a new playground for the kids. Last night they had a big fundraiser to build a picnic shelter that they can collect water off of and that they can sit underneath and clean their harvest and talk to one another. And to me, it's a really powerful story, and you see it happening all over the world. But because it's here and local, I think it'd be powerful to see that.
And me, I don't know. I'm not a director or anything like that, but I think a good idea would be we're seeing a huge decline in biodiversity, right? But at the same time, we're seeing a decline in cultural diversity as well, and those are not related, right? And we don't talk about that enough because those cultures that are and languages that we're losing, every day, there's so much knowledge within those cultures that can tell us about relationships to food, how to grow food, connection to the earth. And we really don't talk about that enough. So what that makes me think about is maybe a story on history. How have we got to this point? What were things like 500 years ago? Because